Have you ever woken up from a dream so vivid, so compelling, that for a few disorienting moments, you weren't sure which reality was real? That brief window of confusion where the boundaries between consciousness and unconsciousness blur might be telling us something profound about existence itself. What if I told you that consciousness, this thing we prize above all else, this awareness that forms the foundation of your sense of self, was never part of the universal blueprint? What if awakening to self-awareness was an evolutionary accident, a cosmic anomaly that was never supposed to happen? Stay with me as we explore why you were never meant to wake up, and what this unexpected consciousness means for how we understand our place in the universe. Welcome back to MetaMind Dispatches, where we explore the edges of human understanding. I'm your guide through today's intellectual journey into the nature of consciousness itself. Before we dive in, I want to clarify something important when I say you were never meant to wake up. I'm not suggesting some grand conspiracy or predetermined fate. Rather, I'm proposing that consciousness itself, that mysterious phenomenon that allows you to experience these words right now, might be an evolutionary accident rather than an inevitable outcome. To understand this perspective, we need to examine three fundamental questions. First, what actually is consciousness, and why is it so difficult to define? Second, how did consciousness emerge in an otherwise mechanical universe? And third, if consciousness wasn't meant to happen, what implications does this have for how we live? Consciousness is simultaneously the most intimate thing we know and the most elusive thing to understand. It's the subjective experience of being you, the feeling of what it's like to perceive colors, feel emotions, and contemplate ideas. Philosophers call this phenomenal consciousness, or qualia, the subjective, first-person experience that seems impossible to reduce to physical processes alone. It's what philosopher Thomas Nagel famously referred to when he asked what it's like to be a bat, highlighting that consciousness is fundamentally about perspective and experience, not just information processing. But here's where we encounter our first paradox. Consciousness seems both essential to our existence and yet strangely superfluous from an evolutionary standpoint. Consider what philosopher John Searle calls the connection principle, the mysterious link between physical brain states and conscious experiences. When you see the color red, specific neurons fire in your visual cortex. But why should that neural activity be accompanied by a subjective experience of redness? The physical processes could theoretically operate without generating any inner experience at all. This explanatory gap between physical processes and subjective experience points to the possibility that consciousness might be something extra, something beyond what's strictly needed for survival and reproduction. If such a gap exists between physical processes and subjective experience, then why did consciousness evolve at all? What survival advantage does subjective experience provide that couldn't be accomplished through pure mechanistic processes? This leads us to a startling possibility. Perhaps consciousness wasn't selected for in the traditional evolutionary sense. Perhaps it emerged as a byproduct of increasingly complex information processing systems, an epiphenomenon that wasn't strictly necessary for survival. For most of Earth's 4.5 billion-year history, there was no consciousness as we understand it. Single-celled organisms responded to their environment without awareness, even as life grew more complex, eyes wide open, staring at a world they couldn't see. At some point, whether gradually or suddenly, something unprecedented happened. Systems that had been processing information without awareness began experiencing that information. The universe, in a sense, woke up to itself through these living systems. This awakening doesn't appear to have been written into the fundamental laws of physics. Nowhere in Our equations describing subatomic particles or gravitational fields, is there a variable for awareness? The standard model of physics works perfectly well without consciousness entering the equation. This brings us to what philosopher David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. Why should physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience at all? We understand increasingly well how neurons fire and networks form, but why these physical processes should be accompanied by an inner life remains deeply mysterious. Several philosophers have suggested that consciousness is what philosopher Colin McEngin calls cognitively closed to us, something our minds simply aren't equipped to fully understand. Just as a dog can't grasp calculus, we might be cognitively trapped, unable to bridge the explanatory gap between physical processes and subjective experience. If consciousness emerged as an accidental byproduct rather than an inevitable outcome, this raises profound questions about our place in the cosmos. We may be cosmic anomalies, beings that weren't supposed to wake up, but somehow did. Consider the vastness of our universe for a moment. Billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars. The sheer probabilistic landscape suggests that if consciousness were a likely or inevitable outcome of complex systems, the universe should be teeming with it. Yet when we look to the stars, we encounter what physicist Enrico Fermi identified as a profound paradox. Where is everybody? If consciousness is a natural stepping stone in evolution, shouldn't we see evidence of other awakened beings? The silence of the universe might be telling us something important. Perhaps consciousness is extraordinarily rare. Perhaps it's an unlikely accident that happened on our pale blue dot, but almost nowhere else. This perspective aligns with what's known as the rare Earth hypothesis. In astrobiology, the idea that the conditions for complex life are exceedingly uncommon, but we might need to extend this to a rare mind hypothesis, the notion that even among complex life forms, consciousness might be an exceptional development rather than an inevitable one. If consciousness is indeed a cosmic accident rather than a cosmic inevitability, this transforms how we might view our existence. We weren't meant to wake up, and yet against cosmic odds, we did. Let's approach this from an evolutionary perspective. Natural selection favors traits that enhance survival and reproduction, but it's not immediately obvious how phenomenal consciousness, the subjective feeling of experience, directly contributes to either. Many of our behaviors could theoretically operate through complex but non-conscious algorithms. Pain, for instance, could function as a pure signal that triggers avoidance behaviors without the subjective feeling of suffering. The same could be said for pleasure, fear, or other fundamental experiences. Some philosophers and scientists have proposed that consciousness may have emerged as a side effect of other adaptively valuable traits, perhaps as a consequence of our highly developed social cognition, our capacity for mental time travel, remembering the past and imagining the future, or our ability to model ourselves and others as agents with intentions. In this view, consciousness wasn't directly selected for, but rather came along for the evolutionary ride. It's what biologists call a spandrel, a feature that didn't evolve for its current function, but was a byproduct of other adaptations, later co-opted for new purposes. If this is true, then in a very real sense, you were never meant to wake up. Consciousness wasn't in the blueprint. It emerged unexpectedly from systems designed for other purposes. This brings us to a perspective that might fundamentally alter how we see reality. What if consciousness is the exception rather than the rule? What if the natural state of the universe is non-conscious information processing, and our awakened state is a rare aberration? Physicist Arthur Eddington once remarked that the stuff of the world is mind stuff, suggesting that consciousness might be fundamental to reality. But what if the opposite is true? What if the fundamental state of existence is more akin to dreamless sleep information, existing and interacting without any subjective experience accompanying it? In this view, most of the universe is asleep, existing without awareness. Stars burn, galaxies spin, particles interact, all without experience. The vast majority of complex systems, even many biological ones, may function without consciousness. Our awakened state then becomes something remarkable, a rare pocket of subjective experience in an otherwise non-experiencing cosmos. We are the universe experiencing itself, but this experience wasn't inevitable or predestined, it was an unexpected emergence. If consciousness is indeed an evolutionary accident rather than a cosmic destiny, how might this change how we approach our lives? First, it might instill a profound sense of preciousness about conscious experience. If awareness wasn't meant to happen, but somehow did, each moment of consciousness becomes a remarkable gift, an unlikely window through which the universe experiences itself. Second, it might change how we think about meaning and purpose. Rather than searching for predetermined meaning, we might recognize that meaning itself is something that only exists within consciousness. In a universe that wasn't meant to wake up, meaning is something we create rather than discover. Third, it might transform our relationship with each other. If consciousness is rare, a cosmic accident that happened in these particular collections of atoms we call humans, then each conscious being represents something extraordinary. Our shared capacity for experience becomes a profound connection. Finally, this perspective might alter our relationship with the non-conscious world. If most of reality exists without experience, our consciousness gives us a unique responsibility as witnesses to existence. We experience the world that cannot experience itself. We began by asking whether you were ever meant to wake up, whether consciousness was an inevitable outcome written into the fabric of reality or an unexpected emergence. While science cannot yet provide a definitive answer, the evidence suggests consciousness may indeed be a cosmic accident rather than a cosmic destiny. This doesn't diminish its value, quite the opposite. If consciousness wasn't meant to happen, but somehow did, each moment of awareness becomes infinitely precious, a rare window through which the universe experiences itself. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't why we're here or where we're going, but that we're awake at all in a universe that has existed for billions of years, largely without witness. Our awakening may not have been meant to happen, but it happened nonetheless. And in this cosmic accident of awareness lies both our greatest burden and our greatest gift, the capacity to experience a universe that otherwise would spin unwitnessed through the void. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. If you found value in it, please consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and remember your consciousness, accidental or not, is nothing short of extraordinary.